Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. Well, we're so excited to have our next guest. In just a minute, we'll be joined by Philip K. Howard, founder of The Common Good, activist, lawyer, and author of Try Common Sense, which you have to read. Read Try Common Sense, replacing the failed ideologies of right and left, contributed at the New York Post. I want to come at, because we may have another government shutdown, and we just had one, I want to come at it from a whole new perspective. Now, we know about the fights over the budget, and you know where I stand, and you know where the left stands, and you know where Trump stands and all that. But I want you to think about this from another perspective. We had almost 1 million federal workers out of work. And we saw that the vast majority, probably 90% of these people were dependent. Half of them ended up in food banks and they couldn't pay their mortgages, and the whole system could shut down because of these 1 million people, and the banks could be impacted. And what do we glean from this? Of course, well, you know, I hate federal workers. I think they're the laziest group of people in the world. But beyond that, we have this incredible state of government dependency. It's not just welfare. It's not just unemployment. It's not just Social Security. It's not just that stuff. We don't realize we have a whole class of 1 million lazy people that now depend for the vast majority of their lives on these stupid government jobs. And if ever these jobs go away, you have 1 million people suddenly who can't eat. Philip Howard, welcome.
Nice to be with you, Jack.
Well, what do you make of all this? Bring us, the Try Common Sense man, Mr. Howard, bring us up to date.
Well, I have a whole section in the book about the importance of accountability and the unmanageability of government. I mean, government's completely unmanageable. It's just outrageous. And there are undoubtedly many good people who perform many useful tasks who work for government. But no one's making that decision.
See, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think that's too sweeping. See,
they have it for life.
But let me stop you right there. That's almost like when people say, just as a Taxus reaction, they chant it like a Greek chorus, oh, most of the people who work for the FBI are patriots. Well, if we've not done a study, how in the world do we know that, right? I mean, everybody chants that, but we don't know that. Now, you said many good people work for the government. Well, I don't know that, right? But just a thought. Continue.
Well, okay. I do. You know, I spend a lot of time in Washington and spend a lot of time working with officials trying to make things happen. Usually not very successfully, but so I think there are a lot of people who don't do a good job. But I've run into a lot of people who do. So, you know, I happen to have experience, and so I think I suspect that most agencies could be run with half the number of people they have. There was this example years ago where the budget was cut for the Czech U.S. embassy in Czechoslovakia, and 2/3 of the employees had to go home, so they didn't have a budget. And what they found is that the embassy worked much better,
of course,
more effectively, with 1/3 the number of people.
Because they stopped chatting. It's just the law, all the laws of efficiency, right? They stop chatting with each other. They actually work instead of talking and going out for lunch and this, that, and the other.
Yeah, that's right. Paul Light is a scholar at NYU who's done all these studies about how the layers of government have increased. And so, for example, in a good corporation, I forget what the number is, but they're usually no more than like 5 layers between the worker on the ground and the CEO. In government, it's like 15 layers. I mean, all that and all those in between layers are just make work.
So let me ask you this. Do you see the dependency argument, though? So we have these people. The dependency in our country is not just things like welfare and Social Security. It's much deeper and broader than that, because now we realize for the first time with a genuine long-term shutdown, and maybe one more to come, we have 1 million people that are now completely dependent on the government. And most of these people are just kind of these fat, lazy types that never go into the private sector. I mean, the way this is supposed to work, right? These are people that are supposed to do, you know, you do your 5 or 10 years or whatever in the government, and then you move on. But now we have a whole class of people that are so lazy they want to be in the government for 40 years. This system was not set up that way. But these people are becoming protected. The civil service has more and more protections in Congress. And now you have a whole slew of lazy people. Yes?
Right. And so we have an unaccountable class, I agree with that, with an incredible amount of fat and waste in it. one of the things I suggest in Try Common Sense is that most agencies get moved out of Washington and distributed around the country so that the agencies are actually in places where people are used to getting up in the morning, going to work, and actually taking responsibility.
That's actually a very good idea. That's a very good idea.
Yeah, and it's not hard to do. It would be cheap. It would be the culture. The culture of Washington is toxic. It's a culture of people who have been trained not to take responsibility, just to push paper from one desk to the next desk to the next desk. And nothing ever happens.
Let me ask you this, though. I like that. I really like that, Philip, and so many great ideas here today. But in addition to that, what about devolving as many of these functions as we can back to the states? In other words, why don't we look at these agencies and start pushing them back to the states? I mean, I think two things about a guy like Trump. Why not just let the shutdown go, let it go into a train wreck, force Congress to do an override, and then just start doing massive cuts in these agencies, which you could eventually do. Then if you take it to a point where you say, look, your choices are to impeach me, Mitch, Chuck, and Nancy, or we can make a 20% cut in these budgets, I think there could be those big cuts made.
Right. So there are two ideas that you just had there I want to trust. The first one is that if you radically simplified regulation, so instead of having 4,000 rules that people get in trouble because their paperwork's not in order, you just have goals and principles. What that does is it leaves to people in communities around the country the freedom to get there in their own way. That's incredibly important. What makes people so angry is this big brother breathing down their neck saying you didn't comply with Rule 526 or something. It's just crazy, and none of that stuff makes any difference. What matters is whether the workplace is unsafe or not whether your paperwork is in order. That's one idea. The second idea, and this former Senator Tom Coburn and I were just talking about this last week, is Congress nobody in Washington ever goes and cleans out the stable. Every single federal program is broken, every one. The question is just how broken it is, because nobody ever goes and fixes it. So he has an idea of doing doing a constitutional amendment that would require what's known as a recodification commission every 15 years, which is one of the things that I recommend in the book, because Congress never cleans out the stable. So this commission,
in other words, force them to refound each agency every 15 years as though it were being christened for the first time.
Exactly. And this commission would not be run by the federal government. It would be appointed by the governors.
Now I like that even better. Now, here's the thing with that constitutional change: you could never do that the typical way, which is passed by Congress and then 3/4 of the states. But remember, there's that other way for constitutional change, and that is if 2/3 of the state legislatures come in and they pass an amendment, we can do that. But we've never done it that way. But we should do it that way.
And that's what Tom Coburn is already in the middle of doing. You already have 12 states signed up. He thinks he's going to get 8 more this year, and he's asked me to write this amendment for the recodification commissions every 15 years, which I'm doing.
God bless you. God bless you.
Yeah, and so that's what Try Common Sense is all about. It's about reimagining the whole system, and what I argue is that we can't repair it. It's too dense. It's too thick. The culture is too toxic. We have to replace it.
Philip K. Howard, founder of The Common Good, activist, lawyer, author of Try Common Sense, and perhaps most importantly, we learned today he is now working on getting those 2/3 of state legislatures to pass an amendment that would dramatically reform and redo federal agencies. Philip, thank you so much. If we're real lucky, we'll be able to have you back again. See you soon.
All the stories and controversies that no one talks about, but everyone should know about.
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364. Operators are standing by 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to take your calls. As we come into the 21st, well, the 20th century, not the 21st, we take your email now, jackberkman2016 at Gmail, 2016 at Gmail. Same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, and special announcement, we will be, and a lot of you already know this, on the 25th, in about 2.5 weeks, we're hosting an event for our friend Jerome Corsi. Big fundraiser for Jerome Corsi as he battles Mr. Mueller. We're going to raise a lot of money for him. And at that event, some special announcements. One of them on Kevin Doherty, the man who shot me, some special news. And also at that event, the latest, and we'll have a special announcement on the Seth Rich murder investigation. Stay tuned, and you know that because you listen to Behind the Curtain. Joining us now, Luke Rosiak, investigative reporter and author of Obstruction of Justice, How the Deep State Risked National Security to Protect the Democrats. The Deep State, Luke, it's one of my favorite topics. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Well, let me say this. I really believe that the number one problem facing the American people is the American government, the federal government of Washington. It's not the Chinese, it's not the Russians, it's not the terrorists, it's not Al-Qaeda, it's not Afghanistan. It's the number one problem is the U.S. government. And I believe that within that big problem, there is a terrible, toxic subset or subsets of national security agencies that are so out of control that they now routinely harm Americans. Do you join me in that?
Well, my eyes were kind of opened over the last 2 years of this investigation because I saw the evidence in front of me and I had the documents and the records and the interviews and all that. And then I saw the way that the FBI and the DOJ conducted themselves, and I was blown away. I don't think I'll ever feel the same way about the justice system we have here in the United States.
You know, when people talk about things like the FBI or the NSA, they always say, oh, well, they're mostly patriots. Everybody always feels the compulsion to qualify their statements by saying there are only a few bad eggs. How in the world do we know there are a few bad eggs? How do we know 94% of them aren't very bad eggs? How do we know it's not the Gestapo, for God's sakes? I'm starting to think it is.
Yeah, and I mean, the idea that we can, swap out Jim Comey with someone else or Jeff Sessions with someone else and fix the problem, I think that's kind of the whole point is that's just kind of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's kind of a symbolic change, and it doesn't really address the underlying issues. Talk
to me about what you know about the deep state. Tell me how toxic. Let's talk about the real toxicity. What is the worst toxicity you have uncovered?
Well, so in this book, what you have is the same week that the DNC emails were hacked and went on to WikiLeaks, there was a separate hack that was caught, and it was in Congress. And the guy who did it was Debbie Wasserman Schultz's IT guy, who's from Pakistan.
Imran, what's his name? Imran or something like that?
Imran Awan, yeah. And so they caught this guy. And I mean, at that time, they didn't have any Russians. They started to do the narrative about the Russian Trump, and that was the same week that they started it. And it turns out that there was, the House Inspector General working with the Capitol Police and others. They'd caught this guy. They knew who he was. They knew what he did. They had the server logs showing it. And what happened after that was basically a frantic scramble to control the narrative and build up this Russian narrative while making this other hack go away. And so we saw the investigator get pushed out of Congress, nonpartisan investigator who caught it. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses were threatened, and at the end of the day, people never really heard a thing about this because he ultimately
and
wasn't
what happened?
charged, even though they knew he did it.
I haven't followed the Wasserman Schultz saga in a long time. Obviously, nothing, no legal consequences for her. What happened to Imran and his brother? What do we know? What happened to these cats?
So they knew they were being watched. They knew that they were caught for a long time, and so evidence was disappearing on Capitol Hill. And there are records that prove it. They're looking for these computers, and they can't find them. And suddenly they find all these computers in an elevator shaft. The guys are being watched, and the records. So the House Democratic Caucus server was identified as being a key computer that was hacked. That server disappeared. The Capitol Police wrote a memo saying it was missing. So these guys know they're being watched. They take steps to cover their tracks, and then they try to flee the country. And so this guy, Imran Awan, was arrested at Dulles Airport with a suitcase full of $9,000 in cash. and he was arrested. And
so
at that
he's
point,
charged. He's been charged. Has he been charged?
No. So, at that point, I thought, all right, it took them long enough, but they're finally going to charge him with the things that I've seen the evidence that he did, hacking Congress, all that, much more than that, too. And all they do is they charge him with financial crimes surrounding fleeing the country. So they charge him with the cover-up and not the crime, which was wind up being a pretty minor financial crime, around the $9,000 in a suitcase, et cetera.
Though he's going to do a year. He's going to do a year in jail at most, or something like that.
Right. And so even with that, they start stalling and punting, and they won't have anything in open court. They won't talk about anything in open court. They're doing everything sketchy behind the scenes with his lawyer, who's a former Hillary Clinton aide. And finally, they make the whole thing go away, and they say, you know what, we investigated everything else, and it was scurrilous rumors on the conservative media. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? My reporting came from government investigators and other government records and, firsthand, documents and evidence. Like, there's no such statement that the DOJ can put out that says, it was all made up. So, the Washington Post came on and it said, it's been debunked. But, to me,
one of the things
aren't
I want
for the government. They look at things firsthand. They don't just echo what
it's a
the
good
FBI
point.
said.
I want to shift gears a little bit. One of the things that struck me, you remember the spy scandal with Christopher whoever over in London that the FBI, one of the things that struck me about the Bureau that really troubled me, and I figure there are other agencies doing this as well, they have all of these consultants under the table being paid, and the sums of money are only presented in the aggregate as part of a big line item. And nobody knows how many people are being paid, what these consultants do. They're hiring all these people on the ground floor to go out and do a whole range of things. I've got everybody in the world. This guy who shot me last year, Kevin Doherty, I've got everybody in the world telling me he's backed by NSA, he's backed by FBI. Initially, I thought it was crazy. I'm starting to believe it's true. What do we know about some of these payments, like all of the consultants on the payroll of the CIA and the FBI and the NSA? What do we know about that?
Well, I think the FBI has a pretty bad track record of paying for people that turn out to be pretty bad people. And I think they were paying, remember the Pulse nightclub shooting, one of the biggest mass shootings in history down in Florida? The Muslim guy shot up the nightclub. And, I think they were paying that guy as a consultant.
He was being paid as, in other words, the guy that did the shooting at the gay nightclub where 50 people were killed, he was on the payroll of the FBI?
It was either him or his father. It's been a while since I looked at that story. But, and it said the FBI was embarrassed. And they tried to downplay the whole thing. And then, in fact, they waited until, the trial itself to kind of try to slip that
Why
back
was
in.
his,
They hadn't disclosed.
Why were they on the payroll? What were they on the payroll for? Do we know?
The guy down in Florida?
Yeah, why was the FBI paying him?
Well, because he's supposed to inform on, fellow jihadists or whatever.
Oh, I see.
But then the irony was in court, they told everyone and they assured America that he was a lone wolf. So which is it? You're either part of this network where you can inform on others, or why would you pay a guy that's just like acting alone? It doesn't as to be an informant. It doesn't make any sense. So, I think that the bigger point here is that when government officials are exposed for being kind of morons and they're embarrassed by their missteps and their failure to, just embarrassing failures.
Yeah.
The instinct is to make the thing go away. And so it comes down to human failure, it's basically we all have this instinct towards self-preservation. And what you had here with the Imran Awan case and so many others is a case where our national security was at risk. Something really big was going on, but government officials and politicians had egg on their face. And it would be so much easier if they could just kind of quietly make it all go away. And so that's what they did. And
all right.
Political reputation.
Luke Rosiak, thank you so much. I wish we had another 20 minutes. Luke Rosiak, investigative reporter, author of Obstruction of Justice, How the Deep State Risked National Security to Protect the Democrats. We'll see you soon.
This is a universe where everything is depicted as a Washington Post political cartoon.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Burkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364. Taking your emails now, jackburkman2016 @gmail.com. Same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, remember, February 25th at the fundraiser for Jerome Corsi. Special announcement on the Seth Rich murder mystery. Don't miss it. Also, special announcement, Kevin Doherty, the man who shot me last year. We will get into all of it. You know that because you know that in advance because you listen and watch Behind the Curtain. Well, joining us now, Bernadette Cattaneo. Bernadette is CEO of the Lakes Treatment Center and one of the greatest experts in the country on opioid dependency. Bernadette, welcome.
Welcome to me.
Well,
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you. You know, there's something going on, and this is where we focus on healthcare. There's a terrible problem going on in your area. This company's done it to you. They're probably doing it to many others. Would you kindly bring our viewers and listeners up to speed?
Well, the main problem that we're seeing is we have all these facilities, and we're out there, ready to help these individuals. And we're getting shut down, either by, bureaucracies. So basically either the state getting too involved and not knowing what they're doing, or the insurance companies not approving treatment for people that need treatment.
And let's talk about the company that's victimized you. Who are they and what have they done?
Okay, well, the one that we're having the largest problem with is Optum Healthcare, United Healthcare. And unfortunately, they are the largest healthcare company in the world by
something
revenue.
Like $200 billion in revenue, something like that, right? They're almost top 10 Fortune.
Yeah, actually, as of 2018, they were top 5 Fortune 500.
Wow. And so tell me, what are they doing to you?
Well, they are putting standards on us that are unattainable and meaningless. Basically, they have levels of care for our detox and residential that we meet for everybody else. And we meet it for our licensing agency, which is the Department of Healthcare Services. However, they make them higher so that they don't, in essence, have to pay us.
I get it. So this is a kind of like they almost have you trapped. So kind of what's the upshot of this? Tell me how bad and how egregious does this get? Kind of walk us through it.
Well, we recently, the way healthcare companies work, if you're going to go get insurance, you can get a policy that's either an HMO, which is a health maintenance organization, where you can only go to certain providers, okay? And then there are the PPO, the provider preferred provider organizations, and those are like what are more standard. And that's what you would see. So with the PPO policies, you can go to a number of different healthcare providers, and with the HMO, you're stuck going with them. So basically, if you hear the terms as an insured, in-network and out-of-network. So out-of-network, you can kind of go to anybody. You could go to an in-network or an out-of-network. But if you have in-network, you have to go to one of these in-network.
And what does that mean for you? So what are they doing to you in this context?
So what that does to us in that context is it puts us on a contract. So if we were to go in-network with Optum, we would basically be contracted rates. So we basically know ahead of time. And usually what happens is the insured has less of a deductible that they have to meet, if any deductible, and they'll have less of a copay. So instead of having a 50-50 on a PPO policy where the insurance would pay 50% and then the insured would pay 50% of our costs, it's more beneficial to the insured to have an in-network policy. I
see what they're doing. So what have you lost? Tell us what the loss is on this. How egregious is all this?
The losses to us, I think they're actually unmeasurable at this point because we can't see what the damage is. What Optum has done is when you go to get services from or want to check and see if you have benefits, they call it a verification of benefits. So say your child has an addiction problem and they need to come in and get services. So we would get your information from your insurance and we would verify the benefits. First of all, make sure that you have those benefits. So if you were to call customer service and check on that, and you said, well, I want to see if the Lakes is in network, if they're not, whatever. What happens is Optum was actually telling people that our facility was red flagged, and we had no idea.
And they completely misrepresented that. So in other words, they didn't tell you. That was complete misrepresentation and fabrication.
Correct. Well, they had red flagged us. They had red flagged us.
Just to suit their own bad purposes.
Correct. And we had no idea. In fact, I had no idea until the parent of an insured called me and said, well, we can't go to your facility because you're red flagged. Well, there were some things that they said internally were missing for billing purposes. But when you hear red flagged, I mean, I would think there's something wrong with those people. They don't have good services or they don't have the proper services. I just
wonder, Bernadette, what they've done to you is horrific, but I wonder how many others they've done this to. I wonder how much of their revenue nationally comes from doing this. How much of that $200 billion comes from doing this? How many other fine treatment centers are they doing this to? You're big enough to withstand it. I bet others aren't, and they're just crushing a lot of these centers with this behavior.
Right. And, it is. There are facilities that are shutting down left and right because insurance companies as a whole are paying us treatment facilities, addiction treatment facilities, less and less and less. So they're finding ways to not authorize treatment. I mean, I could go on. And
think how many kids are being hurt. Think how many young people. Think how many teenagers are being harmed across the country because of this.
And it's not just them. We've had people into their 70s come here, so it isn't just the young people that are getting this. It's, children of parents, but it's also wives and husbands and aunts and uncles and grandparents. We had, they give authorization. It's a long story, but we did have somebody that Optum United Healthcare said did not need level.
Bernadette, I wish we had more time. We would love to have you back if you can. We got to talk more about this. United Healthcare, okay. You should be ashamed. Bernadette Cattaneo, thank you so much. CEO of the Lakes Treatment Center. We will have you back soon. We will see you soon.
This is a universe where everything is depicted as a Washington Post political cartoon.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364. Taking your emails, Jack Berkman 2016 at Gmail. Same number, same email if you have any information about the Seth Rich murder mystery. Joining us now is Warren Farrell, author of The Boy Crisis, Why Our Boys Are Struggling and What We Can Do About It, chair of the commission to create a White House Council on Boys and Men. Warren, welcome.
Looking forward to our talk.
Well, me too. I think, me too, no pun intended. I think where I know where you're going with this. I haven't read your book, but I've heard great things about it. And I think I know exactly where you're going, and that is with all the focus on women and promoting girls, boys are becoming left behind. And not only are they left behind, they become, at a young age, almost a kind of oppressed species. In particular, white Caucasian boys are oppressed in our society. Isn't that true?
Yes, And what's happening is in all 63 of the largest developed nations, boys are falling behind girls on every single academic subject, and especially in reading and writing, which are the two biggest predictors of success among the academic subjects. And I was beginning to hear about this when I was writing. My background was from a feminist perspective, and so I was like, women down, men up. We have to change that and get them all equal. And women having children without being married, no problem if that's what they want to do. But I found out that I was really very off target in terms of I care about both boys and girls, and I was finding that boys were falling behind in all these ways, except they were way ahead when it came to suicide, when it came to imprisonment, when it came to dropping out of school, when it came to drug overdose, deaths from opioid addiction, addiction to video games, addiction to porn. These were all the ways we don't want our sons to be behind. And at the same time, they were being told, you have all the power, and you're the oppressor, and we live in a patriarchal world in which men have made the rules to benefit men at the expense of women. And I've started some 300 men's groups, and I don't know that a single man in that group who was a father didn't give up doing something he really wanted to do, like be a musician or an artist, or even be a teacher. If he had two or more children and his wife didn't work, he then had to usually give up the jobs of passion and fulfillment to do the things that he felt would allow his children to have a life with more alternatives and more options and a better school system, and his wife to have a good home. And so he gave up earning more. He gave up earning less money and doing things that fulfilled him in order to earn more money. And after having made that sacrifice, he was then blamed for being the oppressor. And it was like this just made no sense to the men in the various men's groups I started, and the men were from relatively poor men to men of some repute, like John Lennon and John Gray. I saw this across the board. But more important, I saw that boys in every single with every single background were having problems unless they had both father and mother involved in an intact family. And so all of my the family doesn't make much difference. I was just totally wrong.
I agree entirely. Can I offer a different thesis? Let me offer a more direct thesis. Yep. Feminism is destroying the society. How about that? Is that an encapsulation of it?
It is not the only thing that's challenging the society, but the feminist. It's
a big thing. You know what my mother said? You know what my mother said when I was little? She said, girls today don't know what they're supposed to be. And in your day, that will be the number one problem the country faces. And she's right, isn't she?
I think what feminism has done that is wonderful is expand the options for women. What feminism that has done that has been terrible is to undervalue the family and demonize men, and not realize that boys had been trained. It was boys who were trained with heroic intelligence, that is, the intelligence to be willing to give up their lives and die at the age of 18.
Let me get a little controversial, not to interrupt. When you say expand the options for women, haven't we done that too much? Expand the options for women at what cost? At the cost of children, right? Isn't that what we really mean? Isn't that what we really mean?
Now we're talking exactly the same language here, because when I was on the board of NOW in New York City, the women, the NOW members were saying, we want the option to be able to have children without being married. And today, this is a shocking statistic, but it's precise. 53% of women under 30 who have children without being married. Well, there's three levels of problems with that. Level number one is that some of these children don't even know their fathers. And boys who don't know their fathers, they are the material of the boy crisis. The second group is boys who know their fathers but have very minimal contact with them. The third group is women who are living with men at the time that they have the children. But what nobody knows is that those those boys and girls, their children, on average, they only remain involved with their father for between 3.5 to 4 years on average, and the boy crisis resides where fathers do not reside. So they reside in that group, and they reside in one other group, which is children of divorce who have minimal or no father contact after the divorce. Those are the children that fill our prisons. Those are also the children I found out that are almost all of the ISIS recruits are children that have minimal or no dad involvement, and so this is real. And then I did a study of the mass shooters as part of the research for the boy crisis, and found that the mass shooters, about more than 90% of them had either no father involvement, minimal father involvement, or a father that died very early, or the divorce was very early.
Let me ask you this. What are some solutions? What do we do? In other words, okay, so when I started law school, I think law schools were 28% female, and we thought that was high. Now I think there's something like 52% female. A lot of that is absurd because a lot of these women don't work beyond, say, 10 years. So all you have are just completely wasted social resources. I think it's nuts. But how do we turn things around? I mean, do we really want colleges that are half women and half men? I don't think so, because I think you still have, a lot of I think those are absurdly high numbers. And I think what happens is you waste an enormous amount of social resources when you do that. But that's just my view. What do you think?
I think the most important single thing we can do solutions-wise is to make boys who feel that being a father warrior, that we have to develop a concept called father warrior. And in our schools and classrooms, the first thing, if we trace back divorces and how divorces happen, they usually happen from bad communication. So bad communication leads to divorces. The divorces lead to a minimal or no father involvement in most cases, and that leads to the boy crisis. So if we take that all the way back to its origins, if we start getting in kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth grade, like they do in Denmark, they teach kids to communicate with each other. So the bully suddenly realizes that the person he's been bullying has feelings and has a background and has a way of looking at things, and he starts seeing him as a full human being, and he stops bullying to a large degree. And then when you train boys to be able to express caring and concern and hear their sister and their brother, then everybody is treating each other in a much more sort of full human way. And that seems to create a type of strength in the family that leads to the family being more solid and not just and not just sort of something.
I agree with you, but do we need something more than that? Do we need something further to the right? Don't we need a social refocusing on motherhood? In other words, it would seem to me, if you want, even beyond all of these problems, still more serious is the reality that we don't have enough children in this society. We only grow the population through immigration, a lot of which is simply slave labor. And we don't have, the top 70% of the society doesn't breed anymore. And a society where the top 70% doesn't breed has no future, right?
Absolutely, but let's trace that back now, Jack. As you trace that back, in order to get kids to read, to be effective, you need good boundary enforcement, good discipline. And what fathers usually bring to the home, there's what I call dad-style parenting and mom-style parenting. And I started to all over the world. It's fascinating that dads are far more likely to roughhouse, and moms are far more likely to go, oh my God, when the dad and the kids are roughhousing, mom feels like I have just one more child to monitor. But dads don't explain to moms that they use that roughhousing to develop a bond with the children, and then and that bond allows them to enforce boundaries without there being such resentment between the children and the parents. So the studies of kids that roughhouse with their fathers show that two very counterintuitive things. Their children are not more aggressive, they're more assertive and less aggressive, and B, they're more empathetic, which is about as counterintuitive to roughhousing as you can think. And nobody knows this and nobody explains this to a mom, and moms can't hear what dads don't say. And so the kids that roughhouse, though, and they have the discipline and the postponed. When the father says, if you continue pushing your sister aside or your brother aside in order to win at the wrestling match, let's say, then there'll be no more roughhousing till tomorrow night. And so the kids.
But and to your point, moms and dads are becoming the same thing. They're becoming the same thing, and that's not effective in a family, is it?
Yes, even more to your point. Dads have become oftentimes imitation moms, and that mothering is very important. And so women need to understand, yes, you can have a free choice, but your free choice includes your choice to have children. But the moment you make that free choice is the moment that you make a choice to put your children's interest above your interest. And so that does not mean you have.
In other words, the feminist credo is to very overtly degrade children, isn't it?
Indirectly, without knowing that they're
doing it. Is it indirect or is it direct? I think it's direct.
Well, I mean, they don't see it that way, so I generously, I hope, call it indirect.
All right.
But the outcome is the outcome is clearly that among the families where there are fathers involved, those children are actually doing better than the generation before. Where fathers are not involved, those children are having, by and large, problems not only in the areas of academia that I've been talking about, but because mostly the postponed gratification leads down the lack of postponed gratification leads down a slippery slope. The kids go into school, they can't finish their homework. They feel badly that they're not getting the pride of the positive response from teachers. The girls are looking at them as being somewhat dumb. The parents aren't as proud of them. They start feeling alienated, ashamed. They withdraw.
And then on top of all that, beyond all that, they face affirmative action, like you have to have so many girls, so many minorities doing this, that, and the other. They face structural barriers on top of all these barriers you're talking about now.
Yeah, exactly. But even if we eliminated those structural barriers, boys are smart enough, as girls are, to feel the shame of doing that, because the expectation historically has been on boys to be able to, to do well, to get a job, and to be able to help support the family. So when boys drop out of school, they feel that nobody, girls don't go out with the girls don't go out with losers, and they feel like a loser, and so they withdraw into porn, and they withdraw into porn means that your brain.
All right, Warren Farrell. On that note, Warren Farrell, author of The Boy Crisis: Why Our Boys Are Struggling and What We Can Do About It. Warren is chairman of the commission to create a White House Council on Boys and Men. Warren, thanks. If we're real lucky, we'll be able to have you back again.